All right. So thank you so much, Carrie, for being on the podcast. I'm really excited to get to speak to you today. Before we get started, do you want to just talk a little bit about yourself and a little bit about One Essentials as well, even though we're going to get really in detail about that right now, but just a brief overview of who you are so the audience knows who we're talking to.
Of course, so great to be with you. Hi, I'm Carrie. I'm the founder of One Essentials. We are relatively new to market, underwear and basics brand. We launched in September last year, and we are fully circular. We cater for men and women, and everything we do is designed to have minimal environmental impact possible. And we also ensure that we reclaim everything back at end of life, and we're designing everything for that scenario.
I actually really wanted to talk about the fact that you are a circular brand. So I saw on your Instagram that it says that you're the first UK circular brand for men and women. Is that correct?
Yeah, we believe we're the first brand in underwear and basics to cover both men's and women's in terms of full circularity. So from the design and conception of the garments, taking them back and recycling and repurposing them at end of life.
That is so incredible. I wanted to talk a little bit about the issue with recycling and underwear waste, because most people, myself included, don't really think about the impact underwear has on the environment. Because the truth is, like, we can't really donate underwear or resell it, like the rest of our clothes. So they typically end up in landfills. I'd love you to expand a bit more about, what the issues are with underwear waste, and then how your take back program addresses that.
Yeah, 100%. Like you've just mentioned, one of the biggest problems with underwear is that there is no resale market for it. There's no charity market for it. You can't give away your old unwanted pants that you've been using for a long time. The elastic's gone, they're discolored, stained, whatever may be, they are not suitable for another use case. Effectively, they are completely disposable. Another one thing that we do all own, and we've all thrown them away because we don't know what to do with them. One of the other problems with underwear in terms of recycling is that it's a really small item. So to recycle that small item from fiber into fabric is quite difficult. So what we're doing at this time, we also have a take back scheme here in the UK, where we will take back any underwear from any brand within the UK to recycle with our partner Reskinned. Now, the only way they can process that is mechanical recycling, which effectively means shredding. But the good thing is that then goes into another marketplace, and it is used for insulation, paddings, waddings. One of the problems that we've got with underwear is that if it's thrown away, it also doesn't tend to go anywhere because it's made of synthetic fibers, polyesters, nylons, or combinations of materials. So it just doesn't go anywhere. That's another part of the problem. So by working with Reskin, we can recycle those and give them a second life for another use.
That's awesome. There is a statistic somewhere that there's less than 1% of garments are recycled into new clothes and materials. Does One Essentials products fall under that 1%?
Sorry, did you say less than 1% of recycling?
There's less than 1% of overall garments that are produced globally that are recycled into new materials. And that's a fact that a statistic that I've talked about a little bit in other episodes. So for the people listening, like, yeah, does One Essentials fall under that 1% of people that actually recycle?
Yeah. So with our take back scheme, with the garments that we've created within sweatshirts and t-shirt categories, they're all made from monomaterials, including the threads, the embroidery. We use GOTS certified inks and Lucerne accredited dye stuff. So everything is designed to be recycled in the most efficient way possible. We're also already using recycled cotton within our 50-50 blend of organic and recycled. So we're trying to reduce our virgin material use from the off. But those products are specifically designed so that they're easily recyclable from fabric to fiber. And obviously, as we scale, we'll know a little bit more about how we can process those with different partners, because we're still such a small brand. There is like a question of scalability for some of the partners that we can use, but we also have some that will work with us on a smaller scale, which is great. But the underwear itself is a slightly different use case. So we design and create everything for use case. because underwear is disposable, we've
Mhm.
created it to be biodegradable, but maintaining the performance that you need with that item. So we've used a biodegradable stretch yarn, so we've replaced conventional elastane. And for me, it's about creating the item of clothing for its specific use case. So not all of our product will go into textile to fiber recycling because it may not be the best use for that garment. So for underwear, for example, we would recommend that is composted or biodegraded first.
Oh my gosh. Okay. There's so much in that you said that I want to expand upon, but I first wanted to talk about you said that there's some challenges being a small brand, and that's actually something I wanted to ask. If you've noticed some consumer perception challenges to scale or like fully launch a program that recycles underwear. Like one thing that I could assume from consumers would be like, ew, taking back my underwear, like that's like gross, Like I wonder, do you think that that's a challenge that you faced from a consumer side, or are they like all for it?
I think it's actually a really interesting question. So from the kind of small pool of data that we have as a new business, from the scheme that we've recently launched in February this year, we've already had over 300 people sign up for that scheme to recycle unwanted underwear just in the UK. That doesn't sound huge, but in terms of it, I think that's hugely impactful from the small reach that we have. So it proves that people want that service and they don't know what to do with it. And so there is a use for that, and we've created that kind of service for them, preventing those garments ending up in landfill or just being thrown away and incinerated. So for me, that's kind of shows that there is a need and consumers are willing to do it. Even at this time, we do incentivize that scheme also as a way to introduce people to our brand. Hopefully through a good deed and a good action as well. And I think there is a part of it is having to incentivize consumers into action, because not everybody is going to be readily as willing or interested in the environmental impact, but it's actually they're just there going, well, actually I've got a bunch of old pants and I don't know what to do with them, so this is a great solution. So having that kind of incentivized model, I think, will help to change and shift consumer behaviors. But I don't think there's going to be a barrier, because I genuinely think people are like, I've got a drawer full of old underwear, what am I going to do with it? So I think there's less of a barrier than what we may anticipate.
That's awesome. Do you do the take back program? Is it for UK only?
At the moment, yes, mainly to do with Brexit, and also it doesn't really make sense for us to ship underwear for recycling from other parts of the world at this time. I know there are other brands offering this service within the US, for example. So that there's certainly more localized options. I think it's also important to remember that we are an environmental brand. We don't want to be increasing our carbon footprint because we're trying to do good. We want to make sure that service is the right service within the right realm or region.
Yeah, that's incredible. Can you tell us a bit more about the composition of your underwear? Like that's something else that you were talking about. You were talking about biodegradable elastane. How does that work and how do you use it? Because I haven't heard of it. Like from you is the first time that I've actually seen it being used in a use case. Like I've heard of it being like, oh yeah, that's a great, something that would be nice to have, but I haven't actually seen people use it. So can you tell us a little bit about the functionality of it and also what is it?
Yeah, of course. So the biodegradable elastane that we use is created by a Japanese and Chinese company called Aso Corp. It's a Japanese company manufactured in China, and it's still a synthetic polymer. That this polymer is being created literally to biodegrade within a composting scenario within 6 months, and also within a commercial scenario. So this particular yarn doesn't stay around like a conventional elastane, which is a virgin plastic. So I think this is sometimes where the confusion is coming in from customer facing point of view, because fundamentally it is still a synthetic plastic based polymer, but it's a biodegradable one. It's not the ultimate natural solution, but it does go somewhere and disappear, which is what is the problem that we have with synthetic fibers on the market predominantly within mixed materials, is that they don't go anywhere. So even if you've got your beautiful natural Tencel, you've still got 10% regular elastane that doesn't disappear. which seems counterintuitive.
Yes.
So for me, it was important to replace that because that was the problem. It wasn't hard to get recycled fibers or organic cotton or tencels if we wanted to go down cellulose route, but it was all blended with the conventional elastane or even a recycled plastic elastane, which then didn't make any sense. So finding this biodegradable elastane really solved that problem for me. The yarn itself is also cradle to cradle gold certified, so it's already been tested to a high standard, so we already know that that works. We're actually currently going through a testing program on our actual items so that we understand what happens when our complete garment breaks down, which is really exciting.
That sounds very exciting. I would love to see, this is just me because I'm a very visual person, but I would love to see a video of like the testing process.
Like a time lapse.
Yeah, that would be so
Wouldn't that
cool.
be wonderful?
You're like, oh my gosh, so much work.
I wonder if they do that in the lab. That would be so cool.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the transparency aspect. As you know, I'm all about transparency and impact management and measurement. So there's just so much that you're doing with One Essentials that it's so hard to cover all of it, but I want to try. But I wanted you to tell us a little bit more about your transparency policies and environmental impact side. So in terms of, let's just talk about the environmental impact of your products first, and then we'll go into packaging. So a little bit about the emissions, water, pesticides, all that stuff.
Yeah, of course. So we've worked on our first collection with a company called Green Story, who do full LCA assessments of your production life cycle. So we've done that just for our first collection. It was a significant investment, but for me, it was really important to understand the impact that we're having in production. If we're saying we're an environmental brand and we're using all these great materials, I want to understand what we're doing as a business, where can we improve from the actual kind of garment construction, where our fabrics are getting made, our full supply chain kind of measurement. And that's all done kind of purely on data. And we have that against every item in the range at this time. And what that's allowed me to do is get much deeper level of visibility across the supply chain. So all of our main fabric is traced back to source, which is amazing. Because fundamentally it's still a global supply chain. It's not localized because of the nature of the innovative materials that we're using. So we're still very much a global supply chain. Some of our organic cotton yarns are coming from India, for example. Others are coming from Turkey and China. Within China, we're also working with a supplier that is going through the YES program, which is an anti-modern slavery program, to ensure that we're not sourcing in China from sources that may be employing enslaved workers, for example. So we're trying to look at our human rights cases and human rights policies as much as we're looking at our environmental policy within our supply chain. So it's given us a really deep understanding. But where we have, it's also allowed me to see where there are some flaws, where we can improve. So for example, on our trims, we've not been able to trace back to sourcing our trims. We've kind of got stuck at the yarn, as opposed to being able to get back down to the raw material with our the elastic specifically that goes in the waistband of the underwear. So there's certainly limitations, and again, I think these are things that we'll be able to improve on as we go forward, and as we build the business and we get more kind of client with our suppliers, where we can demand a little bit more information and be a little bit more heavy. But to have our raw material to source is, you know, it's really great for me as such a small business at this stage.
Yeah, most small businesses can't get to that level of traceability, especially because, you know, like you said, they haven't established that rapport with the suppliers, and they're like, oh, well, who are you? Why would we, you know, give you all that access?
Right. Or you're using available materials, so it's not necessarily easy to find that information. But because we're creating our own fabrics to our own recipe, we've been able to kind of control that a little bit more. And what Green Story have allowed us to do then, kind of from a customer facing perspective, is on every product page, you're able to see the amount of water used within the garment, the amount of pesticides, CO2 emissions and energy. And as you add your items to cart, you can then see the impact of your total order, which is what I find really great. It's kind of, as a consumer, if you're really into the data and you want to know, you can literally see the impact of your purchases, because fundamentally nothing is carbon neutral. Things might be offset, but nothing is carbon neutral. We're creating a product, there's energy usage in that, you know, and I think it's important for consumers to realize that, and having that data point so visible within the website, I think is really important to us as a business.
Yeah, I think that's super important too, like what you just said, about nothing being carbon neutral, and that being something to disclose, because a lot of the time from a consumer perspective, I feel like we see a sustainable brand or an ethical brand or transparent brand, and we're like, oh, this is awesome. So I'm doing good. But then at the same time, like at the end of the day, you're still producing something. So it's like very helpful for the consumer to see that. And also, like, I heard that you give them those impact cards as well when they get to them. So it's like, not only are they being told about the carbon impact or like the environmental impact during checkout, but then they're reminded when they get it as well, which is, I think, really awesome.
And I hope it's a positive reminder. I'm actually really intrigued to kind of understand more as we get more and more information from our consumers who purchase, like actually whether they're looking at the equivalences. So is it X amount of light bulb hours, you know, energy hours, or X amount of glasses of drinking water, or are they actually interested in just like the litre and the kilowatt? Like what resonates with them more? Because I think there's a lot of people that say the equivalences are easier for people to digest, but
Yeah.
you know, we're all quite smart people. Like for me, I always switch on to the actuals, because I find the equivalence is a little bit like, well, that's not really real. Like it's a great visual tool, and I understand it very quickly, but it's not real. So what's the real information? What's the real data?
I like that there's both options.
Yeah,
because
agreed.
then people who are more, you know, who need that equivalent to understand, because a lot of people don't really understand metrics systems that much. They're like, how much is 300 tons? Like, I don't know.
But I think it's interesting, because the data, when it's given raw in liters or tons, is flat, but then the equivalences are always positive. They're shown as savings, which is interesting as well. As to how that's communicated to their customers. So I hope when people receive their impact cards, they're not like, oh God, they're like, wow, that's actually really positive. I hope it's not a scary thing to receive. I hope they see that as a good thing.
Oh, I think so.
I think it's just important for brands to be aware of what they're doing, because how can you change to have a positive impact if you don't know where you're at to start with, you know?
100%. I could have not have said that better. That's another thing I wanted to talk about, but when you said, because you know I'm getting off track a little bit. I'll go back to the environmental part of your packaging, but what you were just saying about other brands, one thing that I noticed is when we were talking last time, when we were saying how one of the main reasons that this is so important, what you're doing, is you're a small brand, you know, you have had to do a lot of this work on your own shoulders. You're not like a big multi-billion-dollar corporation, but you've been able to do so much with so little. And I think that goes to show that, you know, it's possible. It really, like, I feel like you're the reason why I wanted to talk to you about your brand and to highlight One Essentials, is because it really is like a great literal example that there is no excuses to not be transparent. And, you know, I feel like even major brands could take some notes, you know, from what you're doing, and implement it into their supply chain. And I think that would essentially change the way that we work, in general. So I just wanted to say that really quickly.
I'm so grateful for you to say that. That's really kind. It's literally one of the reasons I started the business, to prove that these solutions are out there, and why the hell are we not all using them? You know, the reason is cost, but you know, they're there and we should be using them. And if bigger brands use them, they wouldn't be so expensive.
Yeah, 100%. It would even out the playing field for everybody. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the packaging. So I wanted you to tell us a little bit about the environmental impact of your packaging a little bit more.
Yeah, so packaging is a really interesting thing. And I was so headstrong on wanting to create a brand with the lowest environmental impact. To me, it was like, well, packaging is this huge thing because we're going to be shipping direct to consumer. So we need to make sure that it's functional, but also it's low environment as a low environment solution. And I spent a lot of time trying to work on packaging, because the other problem with packaging is it can't be expensive. Fundamentally, it's a shipping box. It would be wonderful if we could use repack, but it didn't work out cost effective. It also doesn't necessarily work for small items like underwear. We didn't see that as an easy solution. And as a small business, it would have been a really big investment to try and use that sort of reusable packaging. So I looked at other solutions for replacing the cardboard box, and I'll hold my hands up, and I don't think our cardboard box is the most environmental solution that we could have. In terms of material, I wanted to use a material called grass paper, which is a much more lower carbon footprint cardstock, is my understanding, than using something like FSC or recycled cardstock, which is currently what we're using. The reason we're not using that is a bit of a Brexit conundrum. It worked out really, really expensive, and there wasn't a supplier here in the UK that could provide that at the time of launching. But what I did make sure we did was minimize the size of that packaging so that it was kind of super efficient. The other big thing was the poly bag. Everything comes in a plastic bag to keep things clean, to keep things kind of in the UK dry. If you bring it in a cardboard box and it rains.
Or in Vancouver, we're the same here.
So everything comes in a poly bag. It was also if we ended up getting wholesale clients, that's how the DCs work. So I felt like there needed to be a solution to the poly bag. And I looked at recycled plastic bags, compostable plastic bags. And I was actually having a conversation with another circular economy expert called Julia English. And she was talking to me about dissolvable bags, because she was saying that if you're shipping out to people, you don't necessarily know that they're going to be able to compost. You don't know if they're going to have a local recycling facility within their apartment block or within, their borough. And she'd come across this dissolvable solution, which was effectively the same kind of bio-based plastic materials that you can dissolve it under boiling hot water and pour it down the sink with no microplastics being released. And that, to me, was genius, because it meant that regardless of your living situation or your local borough or council's recycling situation, you could get rid of this material in the same way. These bags can also be composted and recycled as well. They go into any of these various different processing waste streams. So it's a one-size-fits-all solution to any scenario. And they're created by Invisible Bag, an Invisible company, again, based out of Hong Kong. And they're just the best solution for this. But it's interesting because we have to really specify what to do with those bags. I'm now putting a QR code in every box to hopefully that people will scan and understand the instructions of what to do with them, because customers get them and go, oh, plastic bag. No. Very, very special type of plastic bag. So it's quite interesting because we replace something that's very common for people to see. People don't necessarily realize it's different. Whereas I think had we put it in like some beautiful tube or packaging, it would feel much more special. But fundamentally that cardboard tube may still get thrown away. Whereas this is all about minimizing the environmental impact at the end result of packaging and making things disposable when they need to be.
Yeah, that is so cool. When I was looking at that, I went to the Invisible website, I think that's what they're called, and I just started watching a video in a loop. I was like, how is this possible? And for those watching, I definitely recommend that you check out the link in the show notes to look at that water soluble packaging and how it biodegrades. It's incredible. I did want to re-ask, because you said no microplastics are being emitted when they, how? Like, that's the thing that blows my, I don't understand how a plastic bag that is water soluble goes into boiling water and down the drain without emitting microplastics.
My understanding from the team at Invisible when we were talking about this was it's the type of plastics. that it's the type of material, the plasticized material that it's made from, when it dissolves, it doesn't create a microplastic because it's not made from the traditional plastic material. I guess it's a similar conversation to what we're having about the biodegradable elastane. Yes, it's fundamentally still a synthetic material, but it's not what we're used to in terms of conventional plastics, and that's why it doesn't release microplastics. I mean, they sent me a lot of testing documents. They have been incredibly thorough with all their research and development, but it is very scientific and very specific in terms of the materials that are being used. And I'd be happy to share that with you. Actually, I'm sure they wouldn't mind if you wanted to share that with the team.
That would be awesome. And I might just reach out to them directly as well to have them talk about it as well, because that would be so cool. Yeah, for sure. I wanted to, you briefly talked about you mentioned something where you said that's why I started the company, or that's why I started One Essentials. I wanted to, before we wrap it up, ask a little bit more about the beginning, the start. And we're talking like, I don't know, is this 6 months ago? Like, for those of you listening, like this has all been done within like 6-8 months. It's incredible. So much work has gone into this. So it must be very fresh, the reason why you started. So let us know what made you start this.
So I think it's quite interesting. I've been working in the fashion industry now for nearly 14 years, mainly as a designer for UK brands and retailers, and mainly for lifestyle brands. So for example, I used to work at Barbara. And I think I was definitely a very frustrated designer. I wanted to kind of push products further than what we could within the realms of the relevant businesses that I was working for, particularly from a sustainability perspective. And like many designers, I was also made redundant during the pandemic, so it gave me the kind of opportunity to actually think about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to make a difference. I didn't just want to create another brand for having another brand. I wanted to create a brand that could stand on its own, really make a difference, and like you said, prove that there were solutions out there that could fit into a commercial model for kind of a better product for our planet, as well as being obviously hopefully desirable. So for me, it was about finding that area that made sense as being wasteful, and how could then we make it unwasteful. And I'd been on a bit of a journey and learning lots more about circularity, the idea of this linear system where things end up in landfills around the world, like in Cantamanto, which actually we partner with, as you know, we partner with the OR to donate with every cell to them for that reason, because I want to be part of the solution and part of the cleanup, as well as making purposeful products better. That was all really important to me. So it was kind of about having this holistic full circle vision of the business, not just with the model, not just with the products, but with the whole life cycle, and making sure that we were responsible for that, from creation through to disposal. That to me seemed like the most logical solution to solving this kind of problem of the disposable nature of fashion, and how we just buy stuff, use it for a bit, chuck it away. And obviously we're talking very mass market there, and not necessarily what the listeners of this show may be thinking in their mindset, but very mass market. That's really what's happening. And with that thought process, that's where underwear came in, because it was a disposable item. It was literally something that didn't get sold by a resale market or a secondhand rental platform. It was something that you can't rent, you can't resell. So let's tackle that first, and we'll build off that building block.
Even for me, I've been doing this for a little while, and I didn't even think of underwear, like to that extent. That maybe it was just me being, I didn't really think about underwear because it's such a small item. You don't really think like, oh man, I'm gonna put this jacket in my closet, it's taking up so much room, what's gonna happen with it? So that's like something that I think is really important to bring to the light, is like to talk about like, hey, this is a piece of clothing too, and it's one of the, we all wear it, we all wear multiple of them, we all have like at least 10, 15 of each item, and we can't do anything with it after. So I think it's definitely an important starting point for Yeah.
We wear it all the time. We use it all the time. So I think we should give it some more thought, and start thinking a little bit more about, actually, okay, cost per wear, this is pretty good. My environmental cost per wear is going to be through the roof when I'm wearing my One Essentials pants. Like, we want people to feel good about the choice that they've made when they choose to purchase with more sustainable businesses, not just us, but others too. Like, for me, it's about readdressing the value of those items that aren't given as much thought and aren't given as much time, but yet we use them every single day.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, before we leave, I wanted to ask, how can listeners support? So is there any news, any One Essential news, anything coming soon that anyone should know about?
Yes, so there is some super exciting things coming up in spring. So if you are in London, we are doing a pop-up in Stratford in the Christopher Raven space in the Lab E20 with a group of other circular brands. It is going to be UK's first circular department store. We are catering for everything, which is super exciting. I'm very excited about it. It's going to be brilliant. Obviously, I'm in charge of the underwear department, but yeah, it's going to be really good. Really excited about that. The other thing that we're launching is we're increasing our size range. So we're going up to a 3XL, which covers up to a size 28 UK women. So that's really exciting also. And introducing 2 new women's wear fits on the brief. So for somebody who put a lot of thought into the product, I didn't think about choice on women's wear underwear. So now I have, and there's going to be a high rise, a Brazilian fit, and obviously our classic brief. And so that's also all coming in April. There's lots happening. There's a few little exciting collaborations / experiments coming in the works this year as well. And also I'm hoping to extend our shipping to the US and Canada this year. I'm just trying to work out the logistics of that. So that will also be super exciting.
That is so amazing. Yes, so for anyone who wants to join the pop-up, I will leave all the information in the show notes for you to check it out. And anything else, like, I'm also going to leave her transparency page, the packaging promise, all the everything that we talked about will be in the show notes. So I definitely recommend that you check it out, go on the site and follow One Essentials. I think it's One Earth, right? On Instagram. Is that your Instagram?
Yeah, so you can find us either at www.1e.earth, or you can find us on Instagram at 1e.hq.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time with me to come on the podcast. I really hope this inspired brands that are listening to, improve their businesses and show that it's possible. You just started this in September last year. So, it's very clear that something like this is possible in the fashion industry. So thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.